The stars moved slowly in the endless dark, but for the ancient dragon Orin, time had almost lost meaning. His wings once stretched wide across the skies of worlds, and his roar had once shaken mountains. Now, those wings hung heavy, chained to a broken alien ship that drifted through the silent void. His scales, once bright like fire, had grown dull. His eyes glowed faintly, but even that light had faded over the long years of captivity. The aliens who had built the great ship were gone. Their city of metal floated broken, cracked by battles long past. Towers of silver lay bent and hollow. Great engines that once carried them across the stars were nothing more than cold husks. The only living thing left was the dragon, tied like a prisoner to the ruins. His chains were not iron but strange alien bindings of light and energy. They cut into his scales whenever he moved. Orin no longer struggled against them. He had tried many times before, but each attempt only drained his strength and brought no freedom. The reason for his captivity was cruel. The aliens had once seen dragons as creatures of power, guardians for their empire. They took young dragons from distant worlds, binding them to their ships. Orin was among the strongest of his kind. They expected him to bring forth a new generation of dragons that would serve them forever. But Orin could not. His body was strong, his wings mighty, his flame endless, but he was sterile. The aliens had called him worthless. For that, they chained him to this broken ship, keeping him as nothing more than a symbol of their arrogance. Alone in the void, Orin found little to hold onto. He could not fly. He could not hunt. He could not feel the warmth of sun or the touch of wind. All he had were the stars. They stretched forever, silent and cold. He began to speak to them, not with words of command or power, but with prayers. His voice was deep and low, filling the broken halls of the ship with sound. Sometimes he prayed for freedom. Sometimes he prayed for an end to his long life. Other times, he simply prayed for someone to hear him. No answer came. Still, he prayed. Years passed, perhaps centuries. Time meant little. Orin would close his eyes and remember the world of his birth. He remembered green mountains, rivers that shone like crystal, and skies filled with the warmth of sun. He remembered the voices of his kin, their wings beating in harmony. Those memories hurt, but they also gave him strength. If nothing else, he wanted to keep those memories alive, even if he was the last one chained in silence. The ship itself had grown strange over time. Alien lights flickered in broken corridors. Machines whispered in languages no living mind could fully understand. Sometimes the ship seemed to stir, as if it remembered it once had purpose. Orin could feel it. The vessel fed on him. His life force was tied to its systems. As long as he lived, fragments of the ship clung to existence. It used him to remain awake, though its masters had long since vanished. He hated the ship but could not escape it. In a way, the ship was his second prison. Every once in a while, comets drifted by, glowing tails shining bright in the dark. Orin would lift his head and watch them. They were free, racing across the void with no chain to hold them. He envied them, but he also admired them. They reminded him that even in the endless dark, something still moved with purpose. Orin's body weakened over the years, yet his spirit refused to die. Though he felt forgotten, though he believed no one listened, his prayers carried weight. He did not know it, but each whisper, each word of longing, rippled faintly across space. The stars themselves seemed to listen, even if they gave no reply. His voice was a thread of hope in an empty place, and that thread would not break. there were moments when Oren almost gave up. When silence pressed too heavy and when the chains burned too deep, he thought of letting go. But whenever that thought came, another memory rose in his mind. He remembered the first time he flew, wings stretching wide as he left the ground behind. The rush of air, the thrill of freedom, the joy of knowing he was alive. That memory alone kept his eyes open when despair tried to close them forever. He prayed again and again, holding on to the small chance that someday, something would answer. The broken alien ship drifted through the dark, carrying its chained guardian without aim or destination. Oren was nothing more than a shadow of what he once was, yet he endured. He had no reason to believe help would come. And yet, he still prayed, still waited, still believed. Somewhere in the endless sea of stars, there had to be an answer. He could not know it yet, but his long years of silence were coming to an end. The broken alien ship drifted silently across the empty sea of stars. It had wandered without direction for countless years, a ruin of a forgotten empire. Yet its strange bindings still held the dragon Oren in place. His wings hung heavy, his body weak, but his spirit remained unbroken. He prayed as he always did, speaking softly to the stars, not expecting an answer. But something was about to change. Far away, a small human exploration craft crossed the same region of space. Its pilot was a young woman named Myra. She was not from a great fleet or a powerful nation. She was an explorer, sent with a modest vessel to chart unknown routes and search for signs of life. Myra's ship was small compared to the vast alien ruin, but it carried the determination of humanity. Where others saw danger, humans often saw possibility. Her sensors first picked up the wreck. At first, she thought it was nothing more than an asteroid with unusual metal readings. But as she drew closer, her screen filled with the image of a massive ship, larger than any she had seen before. Its towers and spires rose like broken mountains. Cracks glowed faintly across its surface, as if the ship itself still breathed. Myra felt a shiver run through her. The sight was both beautiful and frightening. She slowed her craft, careful not to draw too near. The alien ship was dead, or so it seemed, but strange energy fields still pulsed around it. Myra studied her readings, trying to understand. Then she saw something that made her eyes widen. A shape was bound to the ship's surface. At first, she thought it was a statue. But as she adjusted her view, she realized it was alive. The creature was vast, its wings stretched and chained, its body covered in scales that caught what little light remained. It was a dragon, though Myra had only ever read of such beings in old legends. She could hardly believe what she was seeing. Dragons were tales of ancient times, creatures of fire and myth. Yet one lay before her, not as a story, but as a living truth. Myra hesitated. Her training told her to mark the location and return with a report. This was beyond her mission, beyond her orders. But curiosity stirred in her heart, and with it came something else. She looked at the dragon, and instead of fear, she felt sadness. It was chained, bound to a wreck that drifted with no purpose. She could see its chest rising slowly. The creature was weak but alive. Against all logic, she wanted to know why. Carefully, Myra opened a channel. She did not expect the dragon to hear, let alone answer. But as her words left her lips, the air inside the ruin stirred. Oren lifted his head. For the first time in countless years, he felt a presence close enough to touch. The sound was not the voice of the aliens who had chained him. It was something new, something unfamiliar. He listened. At first, they could not understand each other. Myra spoke in human tongue, her voice steady but filled with wonder. Oren answered with a deep sound that shook the air, not words but an ancient resonance. It echoed against her ship, making her systems tremble. Myra gripped her controls, unsure if she had angered the creature. But then she realized the sound was not a threat. It was speech, though of a kind she did not know. She worked quickly, using her ship's tools to match patterns of sound and meaning. Bit by bit, a bridge formed. Oren began to understand her voice, and Myra began to hear sense in his words. The first clear phrase she caught was heavy with sorrow. He spoke of being bound. He spoke of centuries of silence. Myra's chest tightened as she listened. She could see the truth in his eyes. This was no monster. This was a prisoner. Myra asked him why he was chained. Oren's voice grew low. He told her of the aliens who once ruled the ship. He told her how they had taken him and others of his kind, demanding they serve as guardians and weapons. He told her how they had cursed him as useless when they discovered he could not give them heirs. For that reason alone, they had left him bound to their broken ship, forgotten in the endless dark. As he spoke, Myra's hands trembled. The cruelty of it angered her. To cast aside such a being for something beyond his control was beyond reason. She looked at him not as a beast, not as a legend, but as a soul who had endured more than anyone should. She told him of humanity, of her people's way of seeing worth not in what one could produce, but in how one lived, how one endured, and how one chose to act. Her voice carried across the dark like a spark. Oren listened, his eyes narrowing, then softening. For the first time in ages, he felt the warmth of hope. Their meeting was fragile, like the first light of dawn after a long night. Yet both felt its importance. Myra did not know if she could free him, and Oren did not know if he could trust her. But something had awakened between them, something neither chains nor silence could destroy. The stars that had once ignored his prayers now watched closely, for the long wait was finally breaking. The first words between Oren and Myra were broken, heavy with distance and strange tones. Her ship translated slowly, stumbling over the deep echoes of his voice. But even in that rough exchange, a bridge began to form. Oren's head rested low against the surface of the broken ship. His wings remained chained, and the faint light of the bindings pulsed with each word he spoke. His voice was not like any voice Myra had ever heard. It was deep, as if it came from the bones of the universe itself. Each sound carried weight, but under that weight was sorrow. Myra sat inside her small craft, her hands resting carefully on the controls. Her heart pounded, but not from fear. She was standing at the edge of a discovery greater than anything she had dreamed of. The dragon before her was not only alive but also intelligent. He was not a beast from old myths but a mind that had endured the endless dark. She leaned closer to her console and spoke again, her voice steady. I am Myra. I come from Earth. I am an explorer. Who are you? The dragon's eyes opened wider, glowing faintly gold. For a long moment, silence followed, and Myra wondered if her words had been lost. Then the deep sound returned, and her ship's systems worked quickly to shape it into meaning. The translation came through rough but clear enough. I am Oren. I am bound. I have been bound for longer than your world may have lived. The words filled Myra with both awe and sadness. She had suspected he had been there for centuries, but hearing it from him struck her harder than any reading on a screen. She asked softly, why are you chained? Oren's chest rose as he drew a long breath, and his voice rumbled through the void. The ones who built this vessel called themselves masters of stars. They stole me from my sky. They tied me to their will. When they found I could not give them heirs, they named me broken. They left me here, bound to their ship, feeding it with my strength so that their ruins might cling to life. Myra's fists clenched as she listened. The thought of such cruelty stirred something fierce inside her. Her people had made mistakes, yes, but to bind a living being in chains for eternity because of such a reason was beyond cruel. She leaned forward, her voice stronger now. You are not broken. You have survived what no one else could. That is strength, not weakness. The dragon's eyes flickered as though a small flame had been lit within them. He tilted his head slightly, the chains rattling as he moved. You speak as though I still have worth. You do, Myra said firmly. Your worth is not measured by what they demanded from you. Your worth is in what you are. You endured. You prayed. You waited. That is more than most could do. For a long time, Oren did not answer. His gaze rested on her small ship, a fragile spark of human creation compared to the vast ruin that had been his prison. He had prayed for centuries, speaking words to the silent stars. He had expected no answer. Yet now, here was a human, small in size but great in spirit, speaking words that stirred the ashes of his hope. Finally, his voice came again, softer but filled with emotion. For long years, I believed my prayers were dust. But now you stand before me. Perhaps the stars are not deaf. Myra felt her throat tighten. She was only one explorer, a single voice in the endless sea. Yet to Oren, she was something far more. She realized her presence here mattered in a way she could not yet understand. She placed her hand against the glass of her viewport, as though reaching out to him. You are not alone anymore. Oren lowered his head slightly, the closest thing to a bow he could manage with the chains around his neck. His golden eyes locked with hers, and in that gaze was the weight of centuries. For the first time in ages, he felt he was seen not as a tool, not as a prisoner, but as a being with a soul. Myra studied the bindings that wrapped around his body. They were made of alien energy, glowing faintly with strange patterns. She realized quickly that the ship was drawing from him. The reason the ruin still pulsed with light was because Oren's life force kept it alive. Her jaw tightened. She could not leave him here. Yet she also knew the danger. She was one person with one small ship. The chains were built by a power far greater than hers. She could not simply break them with tools. But perhaps there was another way. As if sensing her thoughts, Oren spoke again. You cannot free me. Their bindings are older than your people's first fire. I have tried, and I have failed. Myra shook her head, though she knew he could not see the gesture clearly. Maybe I cannot break them now. But I will not turn away. There is always a way. The dragon studied her, and slowly, the faint glow in his eyes grew brighter. For so long, he had spoken only to the stars. Now, for the first time in centuries, someone had answered. In that moment, something new was born. It was fragile, like a flame in the wind, but it burned. The human and the dragon had spoken, and in their words, the silence of the void cracked. Oren no longer prayed into emptiness. His voice had been heard. The broken alien ship floated in silence, but Myra now saw it in a new light. She had thought it was dead, just another ruin in the endless dark. But as she studied the strange glow of its walls and towers, she understood the truth. The ship was not lifeless. It was alive in a twisted way. It fed on the dragon Oren. His chains were not only a prison. They were also a path through which his strength was drained. Her instruments confirmed what her eyes already suspected. Energy pulsed from Oren's body into the ship's core. Each beat of his heart gave the ruin a little more life. Without him, the ship would have collapsed into dust long ago. Myra's chest tightened with anger. He had been left as a fuel source, not even granted the peace of death. She opened her channel again. Oren, do you know the ship is using you to survive? The dragon lifted his heavy head. His eyes glowed faintly in the darkness. I have felt it. Each year I grow weaker, yet the ruins do not fade. They bind me so the vessel may endure. This ship is a parasite, clinging to me as the last of its strength. Myra's hands curled into fists. That is not right. You are not their engine. You deserve to live free. Oren gave a slow shake of his head. I once tried to fight the drain. My fire, my claws, my strength, none could break the chains. Each struggle only fed the ship more. In time, I stopped fighting. I prayed instead. But the stars gave no answer until you came. Myra sat back, staring at him. She was only one person, and her ship was small. She did not have the power to tear apart alien energy bindings older than her world's history. Yet her spirit refused to accept defeat. She thought of the stories from her people's past, of humans who faced giants, storms, and impossible odds. They had survived not by strength alone, but by courage, cleverness, and the will to try again and again. She felt that same will burning inside her. Her voice was steady when she spoke. Then let us fight together. You are not alone now. Oren's eyes brightened for a moment, as if her words stirred something buried deep. His body trembled, and for the first time in many years, his wings strained against the chains. The bindings glowed brighter, resisting, but he did not fall back immediately. A low growl rumbled from his chest, echoing through the broken halls of the ship. Myra watched closely. Something was changing. The readings on her screen flickered wildly. The energy that bound him shifted, as if it sensed his rising will. The ship trembled slightly, its lights pulsing faster, like a predator that had been disturbed in its sleep. She realized then that his prayers, spoken for centuries, had not vanished into nothing. They had lingered, carried into the depths of space. And now, with her presence, those prayers were finding strength. They were not just words anymore. They were power. Do not stop, Myra urged. Your voice has kept you alive all this time. Let it rise again. Oren closed his eyes. A sound left his throat, not a roar but a chant. It was low and deep, vibrating through the air. It was a prayer, but now it was more than longing. It was filled with strength, with belief, with the spark of hope that Myra's words had lit. The very stars around them seemed to shimmer as if they were listening. The chains tightened, glowing with fierce light, but Oren's body glowed as well. His scales, once dull, began to shine faintly as though fire had been reignited inside him. His wings shook, and cracks of energy flickered across the bindings. Myra's eyes widened. She had not seen such a sight before. Her ship's alarms cried warnings, but she ignored them. She leaned forward, watching in awe as the dragon began to awaken from centuries of forced sleep. Still, Oren faltered. The chains bit into his flesh, draining his strength faster. His roar of effort turned into a heavy breath, his head lowering again. Myra's heart raced. She could not let him fall back into despair. She spoke quickly, her words sharp with determination. Listen to me, Oren. The ones who chained you are gone. They cannot hold you forever. You are not broken. You are not fuel. You are Orin, a dragon who has waited longer than any soul should. Do not give your strength to a ruin that does not deserve it. Give it to yourself. Give it to your freedom. Her words struck him harder than the chains. His eyes snapped open, glowing brighter than before. The prayer that had once been a whisper grew louder, filling the ship with sound. His voice shook the walls, made loose metal fall, and sent vibrations across the void. The ship trembled, its broken towers quaking as though in fear. Myra held her breath. The dragon's strength was rising again. His prayers, his hope, and his bond with her were awakening something far greater than the bindings. The stars themselves seemed to lean closer. The ship's lights flared, fighting to hold him, but cracks spread across the chains of energy. Small sparks burst out, glowing in the dark. Orin roared again, louder, fuller, his wings straining until the metal around him groaned in protest. For centuries he had whispered only to the stars. Now he roared for his freedom, and the universe listened. The void around the broken alien ship had been silent for centuries. Orin's chains had kept him still, and the ruin drifted without witness. But silence was never meant to last. As Orin's prayers grew louder and his strength began to rise again, something far away stirred. Myra was the first to notice the change. Her sensors picked up faint signals. They were sharp, organized, not the random noise of space. She leaned forward, frowning at the display. It showed several ships moving quickly toward their position. They were not human. Their design was sleek and jagged, marked with energy trails that matched the same strange light she had seen in the chains around Orin. Her heart sank. These were the descendants of the very aliens who had bound him. Though their empire had fallen, enough of them had survived to carry on the old hatred. They had not forgotten the dragons they once enslaved. Orin raised his head slowly, his golden eyes narrowing. I know that light. Their children still walk the stars. His voice rumbled with a mix of anger and weariness. They will not allow me to rise. Myra tightened her grip on her ship's controls. She was only one pilot in a small vessel, but she would not abandon him. She opened her channel. We are not helpless. We will face them together. The approaching ships grew larger on her screen. Soon they came into view, sleek hunters that glowed with blue fire. They circled the ruin like predators around wounded prey. One ship moved forward, sending out a sharp pulse of sound. A voice followed, cold and commanding. Human vessel, depart at once. You interfere with what you cannot understand. The creature you approach is ours. It must remain bound. Myra's jaw tightened. She answered without hesitation. He is not yours. He is a living being, and he will not remain your prisoner. Laughter came through the channel, harsh and cruel. You defend a beast that once served us. Do you not know what it is? It is broken. It has no future. Its only purpose is to keep this vessel alive. Leave before you share its fate. Orin's chest rose as a growl rumbled deep within him. His chains glowed brighter as if feeding on his anger. He turned his gaze toward the circling ships, his eyes blazing with golden fire. For ages you called me worthless. For ages you left me in silence. But I am not broken. The aliens reacted with sudden alarm. Their weapons began to charge, beams of light glowing at the edges of their ships. Myra's ship shuddered as her systems picked up the rising energy. She knew she could not match their firepower in a head-on fight. But she could move quickly, and she could buy time. Stay with me, she whispered to Orin, even though she knew he could hear every word. We will break their hold. The battle began. The first alien ship fired, a lance of blue light streaking across the dark. Myra swung her craft sharply, the beam missing by only a breath. She returned fire with her smaller cannons, striking one of the attackers and forcing it back. Her hands moved with steady skill, guiding her ship like a dancer in a storm. Meanwhile, Oren strained against his chains again. The bindings flared, trying to draw more of his strength, but he resisted. His roar shook the broken towers of the alien vessel, sending shards of metal floating into space. The sound carried across the void, a roar of defiance that made the aliens hesitate for a moment. But hesitation was brief. More beams of light shot toward them, forcing Myra to dive and twist through the wreckage. Each movement was sharp, each escape close. Sweat dripped down her brow, but her eyes never wavered. She would not let them reach Oren. The aliens spoke again, their voice filled with anger. "Human, you are nothing. Do not stand between us and what is ours." Myra's reply was fierce. "He belongs to no one. Not to you, not to your broken empire. He is free, and I will fight beside him." Her words struck Oren like fire to dry wood. His heart pounded, his strength rising higher than it had in centuries. He pulled again against the chains, and cracks spread wider across the glowing bindings. His scales flared with light, and his eyes burned like twin suns. The aliens turned more of their weapons toward him, firing again and again. The chains absorbed some of the strikes, feeding on the energy, but Oren's will burned hotter than their fire. Each roar he gave shook the energy, weakening the bonds. Myra darted between enemy fire, striking where she could, keeping their attention split. Her small ship danced around the giants, a spark refusing to be extinguished. The battle raged, but something had already shifted. The aliens had come expecting an easy defense of their ancient chains. Instead, they found a human who would not yield and a dragon who had rediscovered his fire. In the dark of space, against the ruins of an empire, the first true fight for Oren's freedom had begun. The battle in the void raged like a storm. Alien ships fired bright beams of energy, their movements sharp and precise. Myra dodged every strike, her small human ship weaving through the chaos with skill and determination. She could feel the heat of the energy pulses even in the cold vacuum of space. The aliens had expected Oren to remain weak, bound by centuries of chains, but they underestimated the spark that now blazed inside him. Oren's roar shook the broken alien ship. The chains that had held him for centuries glowed violently as his strength surged. He could feel every pulse of his own life force, every thread of energy he had thought lost to despair. The prayers he had whispered for ages were no longer faint whispers into emptiness. They had grown into a torrent, strengthened by Myra's courage, and they now surged through him like fire. The chains cracked. Small fissures appeared in the glowing bands of energy. Sparks flew into the void, lighting up the darkness like tiny stars. Oren pulled harder, his wings straining, his muscles screaming after centuries of stillness. Each movement sent shudders through the alien ship, shaking loose fragments of metal and broken machinery. The aliens' eyes widened as their weapons began to falter, unable to keep up with the power rising from the dragon. Myra's heart raced as she maneuvered close. "Keep going, Oren. You are stronger than they think," she shouted, though the words were carried across the void by energy resonance rather than sound. Her hands gripped the controls, pushing her ship to the limits. She fired her small cannons at the alien ships, not to destroy them completely but to distract them, buying precious moments for Oren to struggle against the chains. The dragon's roar grew louder, reverberating through the broken hull of the alien ship. Light crackled around him as the chains strained under the force of his will. The ancient bindings, designed by masters of energy and cruelty, had held countless creatures before him, yet they were failing. Oren's determination was a force the aliens had never expected. The chains flared, attempting one last time to bind him, but his fire had returned. His eyes glowed like molten gold as he summoned every ounce of strength left in his long body. The alien ships fired in desperation, beams of light streaking toward Oren with deadly intent. Myra dodged each attack with careful precision, weaving her craft through debris and energy pulses. She felt the strain on her body and mind but refused to stop. She knew Oren's freedom depended on her. She shouted again, "Do not give up, Oren. This is your moment." With a final, mighty surge, Oren pulled against the chains. Energy exploded from the bindings, bright and violent, scattering sparks across the void. The chains could no longer hold him. They cracked and shattered completely, disintegrating into fragments of light that drifted away into nothingness. Oren's wings stretched for the first time in centuries, unfurling wide and strong. The alien ship groaned and shook under the force of his release. The ruins that had used him for so long now trembled as if afraid of their former master. Oren lifted himself fully into the void, his body powerful and alive, his eyes blazing with freedom. He roared, a sound so deep and full that it echoed across space. The alien ships faltered, their confidence broken. They had expected chains, control, and a weak dragon. Instead, they faced a creature of immense strength, awakened and unbound. Myra's ship floated near him, and she could see the golden glow of his eyes, the shimmering scales, and the vast wings that had once been trapped. She felt awe and relief in equal measure. The dragon had survived, had endured, and had now arisen. Her words, her courage, and her determination had become part of his strength. Together, they had achieved the impossible. The alien ships tried to regroup, their weapons charging for another attack. But the sight of Oren, now free and fully awake, made them hesitate. His presence alone was a warning. The dragon circled Myra's ship protectively, wings cutting through the void with ease. Sparks from broken chains floated around them, small reminders of the centuries he had endured. Oren's voice rumbled through the empty space once more. "I am free. I have waited long, but I endure no longer. The stars have listened, and my prayers have been answered." Myra nodded, her heart full. She had seen hope rise from despair, had witnessed the breaking of chains older than any human history. Together, they had turned centuries of suffering into strength. The broken alien ship lay quiet, powerless now without the dragon's life force to feed it. Fragments of metal drifted slowly in the void. The alien patrol, unable to challenge him further, began to retreat. Oren watched them leave, his gaze steady and unyielding. He was no longer a prisoner, no longer a weapon, and no longer a shadow of his former self. For the first time in countless years, Oren could move without chains. He could feel the stars around him, not as silent witnesses but as companions. He stretched his wings fully, feeling the strength return to every muscle, every scale. Myra's small voice echoed through the connection they had built, and he felt gratitude beyond words. The prayers of centuries had finally found an answer. The battle was over, the chains broken, and freedom was theirs. Oren hovered above the ruined ship, looking out into the endless stars. His long wait was over, and a new journey awaited. The ancient dragon, once tied and forgotten, had risen with a strength renewed, ready to face whatever the universe would send next. The stars stretched endlessly around them, glittering like distant fires in the vast dark. Oren hovered above the broken alien ship, his wings wide, gleaming golden in the starlight. For the first time in centuries, he felt truly alive. The chains that had held him for so long were gone, shattered by his own strength and the courage of a single human. Myra's small ship floated beside him, steady and full of determination. She had not only survived the battle but had helped him find freedom. Oren landed carefully on a large platform of the alien ship, once a hall of power now cracked and silent. He examined the ruins around him. The towers bent and broken, the faint lights of old machines, all of it had been alive only because of him. Now it was still, quiet, and empty. For a moment, he felt a pang of sadness. The ship had used him, yes, but it had also been his prison and his companion in silence. Now it was powerless, just a relic of a forgotten empire. Myra floated beside him in zero gravity, looking up at his massive form. "What will you do now, Oren?" she asked softly. "You are free, but the stars are wide and full of dangers." Oren turned his golden eyes to hers. "I do not know what lies ahead. But I know this, I will no longer be bound. I will decide my path, and no one will dictate my worth again." His voice was calm, filled with strength and confidence. Myra smiled. She had heard centuries of sorrow in that voice, and now it carried hope. He stretched his wings fully, testing their strength. The muscles that had been still for centuries flexed and coiled with power. He had endured the dark for so long that each movement was a celebration of life. Myra could see it in every scale, every beat of his chest, every pulse of energy that surrounded him. The alien ships that had pursued them had retreated into the void. Their arrogance had been broken, and their fear of the dragon now outweighed any desire to dominate him. Oren had survived not because of fire or claws alone, but because he had endured and chosen to rise. Myra had stood by him, and together they had proven that courage and willpower were more powerful than centuries of oppression. The dragon's gaze shifted to Myra's small ship. He realized that he owed much of his awakening to her. Alone, he might have remained trapped in despair, chained by the weight of time and memory. But her presence, her words, her unwavering belief in his worth, had sparked the fire that the chains could never hold. Oren spoke again, his voice deep and filled with gratitude. "You have given me more than freedom, human. You have reminded me that even in endless darkness, hope can rise." Myra's heart swelled. "You taught me too," she said. "That strength is not only power, but patience and the will to endure. You are more than a dragon, Oren. You are proof that even when the world forgets you, you can rise." Oren's eyes gleamed, and he lifted off the platform. He moved through the ruins with elegance, his massive wings carrying him with ease. He examined the alien ship from above, thinking of how it could be used now. It was broken, yes, but not useless. With his strength and guidance, perhaps it could serve a new purpose. Perhaps it could carry explorers like Myra to new worlds. Perhaps it could become a symbol of hope instead of oppression. Myra followed in her ship, watching him move with awe. The dragon had changed. He was no longer a prisoner, no longer a shadow of past sorrow. His fire, his spirit, and his strength had been reborn. He had endured centuries of silence, cruelty, and despair, and he had emerged stronger. The galaxy itself seemed to acknowledge his presence. Oren turned his gaze outward, to the stars stretching endlessly before them. He thought of the worlds he had never seen, the skies he had never flown through freely, and the life he could now live on his own terms. For the first time in ages, he felt excitement and possibility. He had survived centuries of waiting, and now the universe lay open before him, full of adventure and hope. Myra smiled again, seeing the joy and freedom in his eyes. She felt a connection to him that went beyond words, beyond the silence of the void. Together, they had faced danger and despair, and together they had risen above it. She knew that this was not the end of their journey, but a new beginning. Oren spread his wings wide one last time, feeling the strength and freedom that had been denied to him for so long. The broken alien ship drifted below, no longer a prison but a witness to his rise. The stars shone brightly, as if celebrating his freedom. Myra looked at him, and in that moment, both knew that the long wait had been worth it. The ancient dragon had endured, and now his prayers, long unheard, had been answered. With a final glance at the ruin, Oren lifted into the void, Myra's ship following beside him. Together, they would explore the unknown, carry hope to forgotten corners of the galaxy, and show that even the oldest sorrow could be transformed into new beginnings. The stars themselves seemed to bend toward them, welcoming the dragon who had waited, endured, and finally risen. The long centuries of chains and despair were behind him. Oren was free, and the universe had never seemed so full of promise.